We'll be getting an update on the death toll. Hopefully we'll get more information about the gunman, this terrorist, and how this shooting unfolded. Here's what we do know so far. This all began when an officer who was working security at the Pulse nightclub was engaged in a shootout outside of the club. We now have witness video of that horrific moment. I must warn our viewers, the video is disturbing. You will hear the shots, but it's a crucial part of understanding this story.
Look at that, just shooting back and forth.
Mira, vámonos,
That
vámonos,
is
vámonos,
crazy.
Celito.
Look at this.
Let's go.
Mira que llama Alfredo, he's telling you to come. Oh my God, they're all shooting back and forth.
Vámonos, let's go.
This video is coming to you on June 16th, 2016, 4 days after the Orlando shooting. I don't think I have to preface that anymore. There has been many of discussion, many of debate, many of different points of view, thoughts, and vitriol, I hate to say. This video is for the skeptics, for the inquisitive, for the thinkers, for the questioners, for the people that demand truth. And in this case, I hate to say, we might not get that. So, I hope you enjoy it. I'll chime in every now and again. Lots of videos, so this will probably be a long one. I hope you guys like it. Comment below if you want. Fuck you, and let's get rolling. Right now, we know that this motherfucker, in this shooting spree, called the cops and pledged his support to al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS. And it looks like he was Islamicized, and he's a motherfucker. And this sort of ideology does not fit in the way of the West. I mean, I'll go so far to say is there's a global war happening right now of Western democracy, Western ideas, freedom, and radical jihad. And if you question that, you need to look no farther than France, what happened today, Belgium, 9/11, and countless other events, and every fucking day in the Middle East.
Oh, there's always, the bullshit message of, well, we don't want to incite unnecessary violence against Muslims and whatever else. And, we're not talking the standard motherfuckers that are your neighbors that you get along with, and by and large, yes, are reasonable people. Now, you can certainly make the arguments in a lot of, especially more Islamicized areas, where you're going to have the issue of no reporting and things not being shown as they should as far as law enforcement, and problems just sort of festering under the hood of things. But I think that's something that's always a problem.
Well, that seems to be a problem within the Muslim world. I mean, well, and we see it throughout the West that Muslim populations do not tend to if they know that there's a motherfucker, they don't say where the motherfucker is and what the motherfucker's going to do, even if they know.
We're at a time in history after the Orlando gay club shooting jihad. Now, let's cover quickly why that the homosexuals were picked out by a Muslim jihadist in order to be killed. Then let's deal with the question of why are we losing the jihad war? Because in this jihad attack, there were 50 kafirs, non-Muslims, killed, and the death of one Muslim. That's a 50-to-1 kill ratio. That's called losing the battle. First off, the Quran condemns homosexuality, calls them sodomites, but it doesn't really give a penalty. But when we go to the Hadith, the traditions of Muhammad, the perfect Muslim, we find that there's plenty of reasons to kill homosexuals. If you find anyone doing as Lot's people did, that is being homosexuals, kill the one who does it and the one to whom it is done. Another hadith from Dawood: if a man who is not married is seized committing sodomy, he will be stoned to death. So, now we come to the Sharia. The Sharia is the codification of Islamic law in the reliance of the traveler. Kill the one who sodomizes and the one who lets it be done. May Allah curse him who does what Lot's people did. So here we have the fact that in Islam, The Islamic text for law call for the killing of homosexuals.
First introduce a truly powerful tool to understand the world around us, the Aslan Uyghur Decoder 5000. I like to use it when I'm exposed to a cascade of information that makes it difficult for me to understand what is true and what is not. And so I thought that in light of the recent tragedy in Orlando, that I might use it to hopefully make better sense of this senseless tragedy. So here we go. Let's see if we can put it to good use. Orlando Massacre. The Orlando Massacre is due to toxic masculinity, the Christian right, and accessibility to weapons.
But we're not the cause of the fucking doctrine that is spouting this shit.
Well, most certainly not. We're not the founder of Islam.
Yeah. And to make another point on, I hate Islam because I love Muslims. And nothing's killing more Muslims than Islam. And not every terrorist is a Muslim, but Muhammad was a terrorist. To quote fucking Steven Crowder, son of a bitch.
Yeah. Say what you will about the man, I do enjoy his content.
It can be entertaining.
Hashtag Orlando shooting, hashtag not all Muslims, hashtag LGBTQ, hashtag gun control now, hashtag Christians are bigots, hashtag... Everybody was on board with fighting this anti-LGBTQ hate crime until we found out the shooter's name was Omar. Then it was about hashtag not all Muslims, you guys.
It's not true. That's impossible.
Right away, celebrities, bloggers, even Mr. President pivoted to hashtag gun control now.
And the reporter in that case was right. A uniformed off-duty police officer working security at the club responded. He and two other officers exchanged gunfire with the suspect, according to officials. This was right outside as the guy was working his way into the club. 3 people with guns, bullets flying at him, as Donald Trump would say, and that did not stop 50 people from being killed because, of course, the guy had an assault rifle.
This, of course, raises the issues of terrorism, of hate, and also gun policy in this country. After Newtown, after 20 first graders were killed, the president tried to pass universal background checks. Obviously, that was not successful. Why do you feel you may be more successful if elected and in the next Congress in doing something as minimal as that, or even, as I believe you've called for, getting assault weapons banned?
Well, I can only hope that people who are responsible gun owners will join us in this cause. How many more of these mass tragedies do we have to live through? This is the worst in American history. And, you know, Savannah, there are so many killings every day that no longer even break into our consciousness. We have got to take action, and the majority of Americans, and indeed the majority of gun owners, agree with that. Let's keep weapons of war off our streets, like the one that was used in Orlando.
And by the way, cars have other uses. If the only use for a car was to drive drunk and kill people, we'd get rid of it. Now, you might say, well, look, guns have legitimate uses, killing deer or defending from bandits who are coming in through your windows. Yes, but there are certain types of guns that don't have that purpose. That their purpose, as I talked about in my final judgment today, is to inflict as much damage on the human body as possible, as quickly as possible. There was much about the Orlando nightclub shooting that was new, that differentiated it from other recent terrorist attacks. But there was one aspect that had a lot in common with the other sorts of mass shootings by terrorists that we've seen over the past few years, and that was the use of the AR-15. That is the assault rifle that we see time and again when some crazed psycho wants to kill as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And this video is going to be a brief history of this weapon of mass destruction. Now, many throughout history have mocked those who buy guns like this. They will say that they are clearly compensating for something, that they even have small penises. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to allow the manufacturer of the AR-15 to do that because they have used this ad. This is by Bushmaster Firearms. Consider your man card reissued. And so the actual manufacturer of the gun acknowledges that many men feel like they are such scared little wusses that the only thing that can make them a man again is to buy a weapon that soldiers of war were intended to use. Some people, perhaps crazies, that if you want to kill a lot of people, this is what you're going to go for. And yet, for some reason, when I talk about this on Twitter, people respond saying, well, it doesn't matter if they have an assault rifle. It doesn't matter if they have a weapon of war. They could still kill people if they had a pistol, or if they had a hammer, or if they had a knife. And yet, as easy as knives are to get, the terrorists go to the trouble, the relative trouble. This is America, after all. The gun only costs something like $1,000, and you can get it from Walmart, but still far more expensive than a knife, and yet they go to that trouble, implying that for them, it's actually easier to kill people with this gun, which I think sounds quite reasonable. And for those of you who are saying that there's nothing especially destructive or deadly about the AR-15, that it's the same as any other gun or even a knife, and I received many of those tweets, let's have a hypothetical duel. And we're going to duel each other, and one of us is going to have an AR-15 and the other is going to have a knife. I presume that you don't care which you get, so I'll choose first.
Again.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
So that was the take right after the massacre happened. Now, I might, in hindsight, been wrong. This man could be insane. He could have gotten these guns. The FBI might have dropped the ball completely, and it looks like they did in all intents and purposes. There's a lot of caveats that go into this story. This is not open and shut. Now, I am gonna play their good stance on gun control because they make a lot of good points. But first, I want to play a little bit of a podcast one of the great minds of our time produced, and a intellectual black belt.
Impossible. And if it were possible, it would be unethical and have disastrous consequences. And the problem with Trump is that virtually everything that he suggests he wants to do is like that. And please don't hear in my remarks on this topic a soft-hearted appeal for open borders. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not on Maryam Namazi's side of the argument here. I think we should be able to control our borders. I highly doubt whether a wall is necessary to do that, but by all means, secure the borders. But the concern is with jihadists and Islamists, many of whom could come to this country on valid European passports. That's the concern. The concern isn't your best friend's nanny, who stands a very good chance of being undocumented. I just feel like I'm watching our country play a game of chicken, and there's no one in the other car. It's unnerving.
Okay, well, everything you just heard was recorded before the Orlando attack, which, as you certainly know, is the worst mass shooting in American history. And I just have a few things to add because our response to this attack thus far has only increased my concerns about our political process and about the upcoming election. Because as bad as Trump has been, he just gave his big speech yesterday. I'm recording this on Tuesday, and it was terrible, right? I mean, just if you imagine him being our president, it was a terrible speech. And yet, he was better than Clinton or than the president in his response to Orlando. And that is terrifying. The president gave a speech without ever mentioning Islamism, jihadism, Islamic terrorism, radical Islam. He gave a speech that only focused on the availability of guns and the necessity of reforming our gun laws. And Clinton sent an email to her followers where, again, there was no mention of the actual belief system, the ideology that is producing this kind of violence. She talked about guns, and then she immediately pivoted into a concern about Islamophobia and about demonizing Muslims. This has been the most common response from liberals. I mean, the most balance you get has been something like, Fareed Zakaria sent a tweet saying, this can be both about radical Islam and guns? Doesn't have to be one or the other, this problem? Well, it does have to be one or the other if everyone is using the gun issue to obfuscate the core issue, which is jihadism. Now, I am in favor of gun reform. I think our gun laws should change. I think it should be difficult to get a gun license. I think it should require training, right? I've said that this is analogous to getting a pilot's license, in my mind. You shouldn't be able just to walk into a store and buy a gun without any knowledge about how to use it or to store it safely, and without a background check that will find your history of crime and mental illness and the fact that in this case you had been interviewed 3 times by the FBI as a suspected terrorist. So the fact that this guy was able to get guns is astonishing, right? And there's no argument for that kind of loophole in our vetting process. Even right-wing Second Amendment fanatics should be able to get on the side of those of us who want to keep guns out of the hands of aspiring jihadists.
No, it doesn't fucking work like that. You need real solutions. You can't say that you're worried about radical Islamic terrorism and then in the same breath argue, well, we got to make sure that people on the terrorist watch list have access to guns because just because they're on a list, we can't take their constitutional rights away. Then you're not genuinely threatened by radical Islamic terrorism if you're not fighting against these laws.
It was in America so goddamn easy because we don't do anything about these laws. Think about how much ISIS sympathizers in America love our lack of gun control laws. They love the idea that at any time they could arm themselves as if they're some sort of squad in the Vietnam War. There are millions and millions of people, probably 40% of the country at this point, that wants to spend $13 billion plus to build a 2,000-mile wall on the off chance that it'll stop an ISIS sympathizer from coming into our country. But they don't want to stop them from walking into a Walmart and buying a gun that can help them blow away dozens of Americans.
That's the part of it
That's amazing to me. I would love to know why they want the FBI to be investigating possible terrorists. What is the point if when you identify potential terrorists, you can't do anything about it?
Everything they said right there was spot on accurate. And everything, for the most part, they've said in the past has been completely accurate when it comes to firearms. I believe. I do not believe the AR-15 serves any purpose in a domestic environment. I do believe the men and women that own that weapon have some sort of neurodeficiency, and that would be fear, extreme fear. My cousin was a victim of the Virginia Tech massacre. This man used 2 semi-automatic handguns and killed her and 29 other people. The gun of the gangbanger, the psychopath mass shooter, the jealous lover, the random act of violence is most often committed with a semi-automatic handgun. Nothing will be put into legislation about this because this gun is the gun of the killer and the gun of the everyman.
So why not start erring on the side of sensible vetting for firearm purchases? But apart from that concern, apart from getting our databases to cohere, right, and properly vetting gun purchases, here is why gun control has no relevance to this particular act of terrorism. And you should be able to see this very simply. Okay? It has no relevance because there is absolutely no reason to believe that he couldn't have killed the same number of people with a few handguns. He had a handgun and an AR-15 rifle. Those who are fixated on the rifle as a, quote, assault weapon don't understand the conditions under which a rifle of that kind offers a shooter a real advantage. I mean, it seems strange to spell this out in this context, but a rifle offers you an advantage at distance, at distances of 20 yards, 30 yards, 50 yards. That's when you're much more likely to hit what you're aiming at with a rifle than with a handgun. Yes, perhaps in his final shootout with the cops, his rifle did offer some real advantage. But in terms of killing 50 people on a dance floor where you don't even have to aim because all you have is a wall of bodies in front of you at point-blank range, a handgun is arguably better than a rifle because it's much harder for anyone to grab it away from you. And it's the best possible weapon when you think about bringing the gun into the club in the first place. So handguns are just as dangerous in most of these conditions under which there have been mass shootings, in movie theaters, at point-blank range, when you're talking about executing hostages, and certainly when you're talking about a packed club. So that's why everyone who's talking about the AR-15 is just advertising their ignorance. But even more important, and this reveals all of this talk about guns in the aftermath of an event like this to be just empty political preening, because no one, literally no one, on our political landscape, and this includes Michael Bloomberg and Kathy Giffords and every prominent gun reform advocate, no one has a plan to stop the sale of handguns. And unless you have that, unless you're going to repeal the Second Amendment, you are doing nothing to stop this sort of atrocity. And I know it sounds insane if you don't live in the U.S., if you live in Australia or Western Europe or Japan. I know that the fact that we can't get rid of guns, the fact that we can't even aspire to get rid of guns in our society is just crazy to you.